Looking at resolving the euro crisis, I think there are three areas now that there's common agreement on where progress is needed. One is in fiscal union, one banking union, and the third political union. Let's start with the fiscal union side of things. When we talk about, or when economists talk about currency unions, they try and work out what size economy and what structure of an economy makes for an optimal currency area. So would we be better having 26 currencies for each county in this country? There are costs and benefits to having your own currency. Would we be better off having the same currency as Britain because we're quite integrated into the British economy? What is the best kind of arrangement to have? Now, there's a huge amount of debate about that, but when the euro was being established, all economists agreed that the eurozone was not an optimal currency area because it was too diverse and there were different, all sorts of in terms of levels of income and structure of economies in different parts of the zone. And what does that mean? Well, that means that if you have different types of economies within a currency zone, you're going to have, at different times, some economies doing well and some economies doing badly. And particularly, there's always the risk that you're going to have one part or a number of parts doing very badly. So this is what they call in the jargon the asymmetric shock problem, that you're going to have some parts of a big economy doing very badly. Now, if you have your own currency, it helps as an adjustment process to have your currency weaken to help you get out of that period of crisis. Locked into a currency zone, you don't have that flexibility mechanism. So what did economists say? Well, the argument was that if you have a monetary union, you need a fiscal union to deal with an asymmetric shock problem, that when it happens that you get an area that goes through an economic crisis. Now, nobody wanted to do that. The political will was not there at the time to do that, and that never happened. Now, there is a recognition that something will have to happen along those lines to deal with that. But one of the reasons I'm not optimistic about the future is that the political will really is not there to do that. And a lot of that comes from the unwillingness of voters to agree to a kind of structure that will see their taxes go from them to other people. And considering that, in Germany there's still resentment amongst those in the western part of the country for the subsidization of the eastern part of the country. In northern Italy, it's the same about money that goes south. In Flanders, in Belgium, similar about transfers to Wallonia in the south. Catalans now are talking about breaking away from Spain. One reason is they resent having to pay taxes to other parts of Spain. So if within countries people don't want, the solidarity is not there for people to pay taxes to other parts of their own country, it would seem to me that really there is not the willingness among Europeans to have a structure that will see transfers of their taxes to other distant parts of the EU. And that makes putting in place a real fiscal union that will deal with the asymmetric shock very, very unlikely. And just to see how difficult it is, the ongoing negotiations for the tiny EU budget, which is about 1% of the EU GDP, is going through the usual, the ill will generated and the rancor generated by those negotiations are out of all proportion to the amount of money involved. But it just shows how contentious issues around even small sums of money are between the member states. So the second area that, again, economists, when they're looking at setting up monetary unions, is having some sort of banking structure, a banking union to match a monetary union. Now, again, economists looked to the US as being pretty much the model for this. They had the kind of things that most people now advocate, including organizations like the IMF, advocate that the EU moves towards. Common regulation and the responsibility, federalization, so to speak, for banking crisis to the European level, and a deposit insurance framework that is federalized also at an EU, at a Eurozone level. Now, where are we going with all of those things? Yes, there has been since June of this year the summit, there is talk of a banking union, but where is that going? On issues like resolution and deposit insurance, there is no, it really does appear again, the money thing, who will pay the pot of money that would be used in the event of a collapsed bank, so depositors get their money back. There is an unwillingness to do that collectively, and without doing it collectively, you effectively don't have a banking union. In terms of regulation, to my mind, it makes a lot of sense to have European level regulation. Finance, banks, bankers, and banks have much too much influence in every country. I don't know any country where they don't have more influence over the policy-making process than they should have. And one of the reasons for that is they go and they tell politicians, oh, we'll lose competitiveness, we'll have to move abroad if you don't give us what we want, or if you over-regulate us. And that has led to under-regulation. And that's a common problem everywhere. It certainly seems to me that one of the benefits of regulating at a European level, it helps to insulate from those sort of national pressures, and it creates a level playing field. Personally, I think it would be a very good thing to go for a whole variety of reasons. But there really is enormous difference amongst the member states over how to regulate banks. Should the German minimalist position, should it only be some of the bigger banks, or should it be all banks? There is no agreement on this, and the process of moving towards a banking union, it looks as though it's going to be slow, incomplete, and not enough to deal with the problems in the longer term of the euro crisis weaknesses. What about political union? Well, particularly, I think the banking union thing, if it worked, is more a regulatory thing. I think it's quite low down on the political spectrum. I don't think it's something that voters in the street are going to protest against one way or the other. But fiscal union is at the very core of politics. Who you pay your taxes to, how much tax you pay, where the money goes. This is at the absolute core of politics in a modern democracy. Now, what if we do move in that direction? What does it mean? Certainly, in my view, having direct elections for part of the executive in the EU, if we are talking about having a finance minister or a de facto finance minister at Eurozone level, it seems to me that currently, as you know, that the Commission, which acts as effectively the government, a sort of quasi-government in the Eurozone, is accountable to the European Parliament, and that there are checks and balances from the Member States. That if we go down the route where we have a Eurozone finance minister, it seems to me that the executive will have to have some sort of democratic accountability as well, ultimately having elections for the President of the European Commission. Now, there are all sorts of difficulties around that, but to my mind, a real democratic deficit, and I always believe that there hasn't been a democratic deficit in the EU, but if we were to go towards fiscal union and not widen the franchise to cover voting for President of the European Commission, the democratic deficit would open up. However, I see absolutely no prospect of the Member States agreeing to that. So if we look across the three areas of fiscal union, banking union, political union, there is talk about these things. There are some movements towards them, but in my view, not enough. And the reason for that is that there are simply so many barriers and problems in achieving it. So just to list off some of them. If we think about just how big the debate is between those who advocate stimulus and those who advocate consolidation, there's a huge disagreement in the economics profession that trickles down to the political side. Politicians are saying, we hear this from economists, we hear that from economists. Who do we believe? What do we know? The truth is, nobody knows. Nobody can be absolutely sure about which way is the best to manage this crisis. And I'm, frankly amazed that so many economists can say with absolute clarity, no, austerity doesn't work, or yes, we have to cut and austerity is the only way. We simply don't have the evidence base to be able to make absolutely rock solid, come to rock solid conclusions about those things. Other difficulties, there's a north-south divide that is very, very clearly opened up in Europe. In terms of the main players, Germany's position, and the ambassador, I'm sure will forgive me, in my view, Germany has not lived up to its responsibilities. With great power comes responsibility, and there needs to be more leadership. And Germany gets criticised for being too domineering. In my view, it hasn't shown enough leadership. and moved and brought other people with it, it's tended to be a block on progress rather than leading progress. German elite opinion has moved away from Europe in a way that I really never thought it would. During the year, hundreds of economists signed a letter opposing further moves towards some of the things I was talking about earlier. People in the legal profession have come out strongly against further integration. So that's in Germany alone. France, a country that does often advocate deeper integration, yet when it comes to it, seems very often to give the impression, well, the rules are fine, they're for the small guys, they're not for us. It wants to retain its sovereignty and its freedom of action and integrate further. Italy, many problems in Italy, politically dysfunctional, as well as having an economy that really hasn't grown for 10 years. Spain, many of problems similar to our own, as well as the risk of political fragmentation. You mentioned the Catalonia thing earlier on. Other problems, that issue of economic growth. Many countries are in a position now that their debts are only sustainable if their economies grow. Now, if we think about that as individuals, imagine you going to the bank and saying, give me more money, but the only way I'm ever going to be able to pay you back is if that I'm absolutely certain that my income is going to rise. I'm going to get a pay rise every year. That's the position so many governments have gotten themselves into. And if we don't get economic growth, we're going to have a forced default scenario in Europe. And the results of that are entirely unknowable. Previous defaults, particularly with Latin America and for highly indebted poor countries, the amount of money involved was fragment of what we're talking about now. We've no idea what would happen to the entire financial system if we got into the kind of default scenario with countries, Portugal, Ireland, Spain, Italy defaulting. This would be an entirely unprecedented territory, and given how weak the whole financial system is, it's not at all clear to me the financial system will survive that kind of default shock. And then finally, just to finish with the issue of solidarity, anybody who's familiar with the Eurobarometer, a biannual opinion poll of citizens across the EU and beyond, the bulk of it is with 27, it really is shocking how public opinion has shifted on the EU over the past 4 or 5 years, and particularly since the crisis. One of the questions that's asked, do you think your country has benefited from membership? The numbers of people saying no has risen a lot, in some countries dramatically, whereas the numbers of people saying yes has fallen. Trust in the EU has collapsed in many countries and fallen in almost every country. Trust in the European Central Bank has been even more marked in its decline, and the numbers of people saying they don't trust it. So even if we do need more integration to deal with the problem of fixing the single currency, I'm very doubtful that it is something that people either want or ultimately will accept. Thank you.